the bioeconomy is going to be impacting everything that human beings consume or produce. A view of biotech where life becomes programmable. And I really think that this notion of programmable life is really center for what our industry is aiming for now when we're talking about tech bio. A lot of us now, more and more on the longevity space, are thinking about aging as a disease. DNA has the ability actually to store a huge amount of information on a form factor which is actually ridiculously small. I'm talking about being able to store the equivalent of the National Archive for a country on something that is as big as a pill.
Hey everyone, this is Prashant and I'll be host of the VC10X podcast. And today we have Loretta Tioiela with us. Loretta is the founder of Next Sequence, a venture capital firm at the forefront of one of the most exciting fields in science and technology, the convergence of artificial intelligence and synthetic biology. With a rich background in deep tech, holding strategic positions at global giants like Huawei and Samsung, and working as Chief Product Officer at cloud innovator Scaleway, Loretta possesses a unique and powerful perspective. In this episode, we talk about the dawn of TechBio and programmable life, the convergence of AI and biotech, redefining health, aging, and disease, rewiring the brain, and a new look at psychedelics, the future of computing and data, the importance of open collaboration in biotechnology, and lots more. So, without wasting any time, let's dive straight in. This episode is sponsored by my own podcasting agency called Podcast 10x, where I help venture capitalists, asset managers, allocators, and family offices in starting their own podcast and building a strong brand. Podcast 10x is designed in a way to work well with the busy schedule of investors, where we handle every aspect of podcast production so you can focus on investing. If you're looking to build a strong investor brand, starting a podcast should be right up your priority list. It's the only form of marketing where you can showcase your strong network, in other words, access to limited partners and founders, and grow that network further. And contrary to what most people hear, it's still very early to start a podcast. There are at least 10x more newsletters and 1000x more blogs than there are podcasts in this world. You can learn more about our podcasting services at podcast10x.com. I'll make sure to add the link in the description below. Enjoy this episode. Hey, Loretta, so good to have you on the VC10X podcast. How are you doing?
Amazing, amazing. Very nice to be able to talk.
Likewise, great to talk to you. And to start things off, can we talk about how do you define the term tech bio and why do you believe it represents the next industrial revolution?
Of course. So TechBio is really about the notion of computational biology and computing technology applied to biotechnologies. And so TechBio has been a term that has been coined and around more and more in the biotech industry. I think what it actually pertains to is the ability actually to think about biotechnology from a software industry and this idea of compressing the timeline of research and development to the power of algorithm that allow us actually to have a faster and wider way to address very large search spaces.
Right, absolutely. And what is your core investment thesis at Next Sequence Ventures, and how do you identify startups that are truly disruptive in the synthetic biology and tech biospace?
Sure. So, our firm, Next Sequence, is an emerging investment firm focusing on supporting, investing, and accelerating pre-seed, seed stage company specializing into using any kind of computing technology to fast forward biotechnology. So when we're talking about any kind of biotechnology, that means that originally people tend to think about AI in bio apply to topics such as drugs and therapeutics. But over the past 5 years, we've built a massive pipeline of more than 5,000 startups globally. And we've seen the evolution of the industry from a vertical perspective, but also from a volume human value perspective. And what we can see is, although a lot of startups still now aggregate around drugs and therapeutics, we have more cases that basically are extremely interesting from an investment perspective. So we see a lot of startups working in topics such as biomanufacturing, as well as climate tech, food and agriculture. And you already start to see the application of these very high principle to consumer goods. And so we've seen more and more over the last past 2 years application to use cases such as fashion tech and cosmetic products. So it really spans across a very wide range of industry. And I would say that the best way to think about it is maybe to use one of the sentences used into the bioeconomy report produced by McKinsey, which basically say the bioeconomy is going to be impacting everything that human being consume or produce. And so if you start thinking about it from that perspective, that means that you can really see why TechBio and every application of computing technology applied to biotechnology is going to be a fundamental of the next wave of innovation, because you basically span across any industry.
Yeah, that's an amazing perspective there, to think of in that way. And you often speak about the convergence of AI, quantum computing, and biotechnology, right? What are some real world examples where these fields have successfully intersected?
Yeah, so in the field of AI and biotech, I think the most successful application that we can see right now are really in the topic of drugs and therapeutics. And so we have now more and more companies that are actually becoming companies that we can consider as mainstream, such as Mammoth Bioscience or even Tempus AI that just went IPO just a while ago. And these are very strong cases of the power of what we can do. We're talking about the ability to basically fast forward the search space and therefore be able to find in the amount of compound possible, and we're talking about millions of possible molecule conformation, the right potential confirmation that could be turned into drug assets that will go into becoming blockbuster drugs. And so, to a certain extent, even though AI was not necessarily actually involved into the design of the COVID-19 vaccine, it's really this I principle of putting at a task which is massive, the power of computing technology to really fast forward that cycle. So applying it to the idea of not having an approach to life science, which is based on the idea of having a very iterative approach where you actually observe only what's going to happen from a biological perspective and then trying to mimic it. But we're shifting away from that principle that govern biotech industry for hundreds of years to a view of biotech where life become programmable. And I really think that this notion of programmable life is really center for what our industry is aiming for now when we're talking about tech bio. This idea of thinking about their life's basic block as something that we can basically program the same way as we're programming actually software, where in software we're dealing with zeros and one, and whereas in bio we're using the four letters that is actually core of how information is actually stored on the DNA. And so from that perspective, everything become a target to be programmed. And I think that one of the challenges that we're facing right now in our industry is try to really aim for this idea that everything is a function, and that function can basically be genetically programmed. So doesn't mean necessarily that we are yet entirely there. Biology is messy, and we still have a lot of things that we don't know and that we need to learn, but having computing tools are actually a very powerful way to basically get us there faster and in more efficient way.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's quite interesting to think about that. Okay, humans can be programmable too, right? And when you say that, do you mean that by new life that's being created, that maybe we can program that, maybe remove diseases from newborn babies? That's maybe one possibility. Or do you also mean in the context of adults that we can also maybe program adults and change a few things about them as well?
I think that gene therapy have been around for quite some years now. We've seen a lot of application. We've seen very successful application of gene therapies, allowing us to correct blindness from people that were actually naturally born with blindness. And so we start to see basically this application not only in fetuses and newborns or babies, but in broader cases. So again, I think that what we don't want as an industry is actually to oversell it. We don't want to actually promising that our technology are not yet able to accomplish. But I do like the idea of having that strong vision that someday soon enough, and rather sooner than later, because we are really accelerating at a very amazing pace right now, that we're going to be basically able to correct some of the diseases. But we're talking about diseases that are either, I would say, recurring diseases, such as diabetes, disease that are actually people for people that are born with these genetic diseases. We're talking also about rare diseases. I think about the case from a pharma industry where up until right now for rare diseases, there's basically almost no business model, and that's actually a strong issue because there is thousands, if not millions, of rare diseases that are basically not tackled, but are from a human perspective impacting real life families, and a lot of people are actually waiting. So I think that TechBio and the usage of biotech combined with computing technology is actually a way forward to address some of these use cases because um, in biotech, the capex involved, the timeline involved, have made it up until right now impossible for us actually to care for rare diseases. But now, if we have computer technology that basically compress the cost structure, compress the timeline to research and the effort needed, it brings to us as species the ability to really now start being able, from a business model perspective, tackle down these very corner use cases. So, from everywhere you think about it, whether it is diabetes and recurring diseases, whether you're talking about rare diseases and born blindness or any other topics, or if you're talking about maybe black swan events such as pandemics, such as the one that we've lived through with COVID-19, we really now at a stage where we could potentially really address them through the power of bringing together these new technologies such as biotech and AI. I'm also thinking about aging. Because to a certain extent, if you really think about it, a lot of us now more and more on the longevity space are thinking about aging as a disease. And so if you start to think about it from that perspective, that means also that we're able to think and start addressing the topic of aging as something that we can actually cure through actually trying to develop new technologies based in between the combination of biotech and computing technology to address this.
Absolutely. That's quite interesting to learn. And you being an insider in this space, how would you rate at what stage we are in those developments where we are trying to think about longevity and maybe increasing the average lifespan of humans to maybe go beyond even 100 years if that's possible at some point of time, right? So at what stage of developments are we, and do you think the coming in of AI and these new technologies is going to potentially accelerate us on that path?
That's a tricky question. To be able to assess at what stage we are, that's suppose that I'm able actually to foresee where is the end stage. So I think that's a wild guess, but I would say for sure that there's been for quite some time a lot of hype around longevity, and then just like for any hype cycle, that hype kind of wind down, and we're back at it again. I think Brian Johnson and and many people that are actually pushing for the idea of not dying. I really like trying to put the stage of the topic of longevity on the stage and central. I still think that there's a long way to go, but it's not 100 years. We're really thinking about decades, if not less, of research that will take us to maybe a next jump from a human perspective. I always see that most of the people working in longevity care not really so much about just extending actually the lifespan, but they will care more about expanding healthy lifespans. So they are caring more about making sure that we live a healthier life much longer rather than just purely extending artificially life in itself. Again, it's very difficult to forecast how long that will take. But again, I do feel that decades are what we're talking about here and not centuries.
Got it. Thanks for sharing that. And right, even to these developments in biotechnologies, there's like two sides of the coin. One is, of course, need based. There are really uh, catastrophic or really bad problems out there, that diseases that need to be solved and found a cure for, like maybe cancer is one of them. But on the other side, there is also, you can say, luxurious kind of needs of biotechnology that we're seeing these days, where people are taking enhancements to maybe look more different than what they already do, right? Or maybe feel differently, feel in an enhanced state of mind, right? So all those different sort of things are also happening. So give us an insight into how things are looking on that side of things.
Yeah, I think I have a topic that I like a lot, which is psychedelics. And I think the reason why I really love psychedelics is because somehow for me there is a very strong emotional connection to the reason why I started on this journey to begin with. I've grown up in a very poor background, and of course, when you grow up in such background, you have to deal with a lot of the social issue and also behavioral issues such as alcohol or violence. And so violence has been something that I've been familiar with, that I've known with, I've been kind of a thread across my entire life. And one of the reasons why I originally started on this was because I have my personal topic that basically violence is the most widespread form of pandemic that we're not addressing just because there is no biological agent behind it. And my focus was to basically try to work on first the first side coin of violence, which is the trauma that comes with it. And so I was interested at that time into brain-computer interfaces because I wanted actually to develop and work on technology that read and write on the brain. And so it's really because I was trying to pull on this idea of finding the best technology that would be able to be mass spread to address these that I actually started to tap into when I discovered synthetic neurobiology. And so for me, I think that when I think about the psychedelics, I see how the effort that have been now renewed and rekindled into psychedelics research is actually massive. We're using AI as a way to search again the space for application of psychedelics to be able to address mental health. And behind this idea of using psychedelics for mental health, there's a lot of things that can unfold. If you really think about it, you can use it to address some of the societal issues that we're facing. So I'm based in San Francisco, and so it's very hard to ignore that in San Francisco you have some part of the city that are actually dealing with massive drugs issues, and my perspective on this has always been I think that the way that we're addressing drugs addiction and addiction in general is actually kind of backward because we're trying to solve something by not actually fixing the original problem, but just a side effect, and therefore we are never going really to fix it. Now, psychedelic research shows tremendous potential into fixing some of these. And I think that one of the reasons why is because somehow now, for something, for a reason that we are not yet able to explain, psychedelics allow for that rewiring of the brain, the one that I was telling you originally I was after. And so, although the technology is not the one I was actually aiming for, it's not a brain computer interface, it's not a chipset, it's not synthetic neurobiology, it's still a way to rewire the brain. And so, I think that in a way, if you really think about it, psychedelics offer some of the potential actually to fix drugs and addiction problem. But behind it, it's not just about drugs and addiction, because drugs and addiction, in my view, are just symptomatic of deeper issues. And that deeper issues is actually trauma, is actually about well-being, about the notion of consciousness and sentience. How are you? Who are you? Why are you here? What are you aiming for? What is the meaning of your life? And so, something that is actually anchored very deeply into every one of us. And so, it pushed the boundaries of us understanding a little bit more about the human psyche and what we are aiming for as human beings. So, if you really start, to go into the rabbit hole, that topic of research can take you a little bit further than what you would expect. So, yeah, there is many research topic that I found extremely exciting. Psychedelics being one of them. Obviously, brain-computer interface is also another side of the coin. We've seen, at least on my perspective, I've seen an uptake into wearable devices. We started with the Oura Ring a couple of years ago, and it took a very crowd-sounded approach to Oura to kickstart to be where it is right now. Right now, Oura is actually a massive successful product, but for a long time, a lot of people didn't believe in Oura. And I think to a certain extent, now we're trying to think about other ways to use wearables. And really, I can see over the last past year and 2 years, really the number of startups working on wearables, applying it now to other side of the body. And definitely the brain is the one that most of the startup are aiming for right now.
Right, that's quite interesting to learn. And about psychedelics, I was actually unfamiliar with what psychedelics was before about a few months back, or maybe let's say a year back, when I actually did an episode with a VC who was focused on investing in psychedelics, right? And that entire episode, we just talked about what is it. It was basically me asking him very noob questions about it. That what is it? How do you do it? Who should do it? Who should not do it? Right? And how is it different from maybe drugs that lead to addiction and things of that sort, right? Personally, I haven't tried it. I'm kind of a little bit scared that maybe I get addicted to psychedelics itself. uh, but yeah, I think there is research out there and people can do their own research before seeing if that's something that works for them, right? Interesting. Great. So to the next question, you co-founded OpenSynthBio, the first open computing foundation for synthetic biology. What role does open source collaboration play in advancing this field?
I think OpenSynthBio was actually the first foray into building my investment thesis. I was a young executive at that time, working on cloud computing, and I needed a way to kind of bridge in between where I was in computing and 15 years of experience in computing and biotech. So OpenSynthBio was a way for me to kind of assess the appetite of the industry, kind of mapped out also the industry, being able to know how strong my gut feeling was, how many startups were basically working actively on AI and bio out there, what were they doing, what were some of the problems that they were doing. But it was also my foray into trying to apply some of the high level principle that was very dear to me and that I knew in my gut was actually going to be very defining for the industry. Because when I started to think about it and jump from where I was to go and be crazy enough to say, I'm going to build an investment firm and I'm going to invest into AI and bio companies, the rationale was actually very clear. What I needed is, as I was explaining, was I could feel the frustration of where I was because I didn't feel like I could move my research on the brain to the stage that I wanted because the industry was locked down. and the industry was locked down because basically in bio right now, and it has ever been, everything is built around a strong IP strategy, and this IP patent strategy makes it very secretive, very closed source, very paywalled when it comes to every kind of information, and specifically when it comes to data. Now, keep in mind that the way that I was approaching this was from a computer scientist perspective, and so what I was after was basically the data set. I needed that, specifically because I needed to be able to tap into that dark matter, and you cannot tap into it if it's not exposed. And very quickly, because I've been in the industry for 15 years, the parallel that I drew was basically that, huh, very interestingly, it looked a lot like what I felt and experienced when I started 15 years ago. 15 years ago, when I started in software, every project basically that I was working on were always centered around three things: build me a authentication layer, build me a billing services, and then build me the core product, which is what we're trying to sell, our core expertise. But on either side of the equation, authentication services and billing services, it was pretty much the same thing that I was building from one company to another. Now, along the way, the software industry actually changed. It went from being entirely private and entirely crowdsourced to a huge community of people that were kind of, hackers, believers, noobs, all wishing for a better world and being crazy and naive enough to think that we could do it through open source. And that open source movement changed everything. If you really think about it, Google wouldn't be Google if it was not for open source. Google would have never made it to becoming a strong competitor to iOS. It was not for Android. And Android was basically built on the sheer will of a massive open community of people that openly contributed without never being compensated financially for it, just because we believed in Android from an open source perspective. So for me, this idea of having open collaboration, having open tools that we actually build together as an industry, and also this idea of stopping to integrate vertically, where every one of us build again and again the same stack. But whereas where right now, if you think about it, when everyone wants to have billing and authentication, well, we use HashiCorp, we use Stripe, we don't build it ourselves. So this high principle of having not vertically integrated product, but where every one of us actually build on each other by consuming some of the resources that we need out of people that are specialized for it. This notion of open collaboration, open framework that allow everyone to actually build work. One of the strong some of the some strong core principles that I wanted to import. What I could feel was basically we needed that same moment that happened in software, we needed the same happening in biotech. And so OpenSynthBio was actually built on these premises. And so it has been paused right now because we are reshaping it into now what it's meant to be, an entire broad industry, broad initiative that encompass not just me, but some of the strongest player in the ecosystem. But it served its purpose for me, at least as a new emerging manager, because it really allowed me very quickly to build a way to test my thesis, to build data on what that investment thesis meant, meaning in terms of volume and value, how many company were basically raising every year, year over year. How much were they raising? How was the distribution between pre-seed, seed, and Series A plus, and what that meant? And for an emerging manager, these are essential numbers that you need to be able to convey because it proves that you goes beyond basically a gut feeling of what you can invest in, but you're coming to your LPs with strong data about what's happening in the ecosystem and where they actually should place their bets. And so, yeah, it was extremely interesting for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very good work that you're doing there and needed work, not just for your companies put in the portfolio, but also for the entire ecosystem in general. If things become more open, more people can contribute to it, and more people, as a result, will benefit from it. It's going to compound over time. And like you said, it's happened with software, and it should happen with synthetic biology or other spaces as well. So that's very important work, and people should take note of that, right? Great. So can you share some of the interesting portfolio companies that you've bagged and that are doing and solving exciting problems?
Yeah, so as an emerging manager, I think trying to build a firm in the most difficult time of the VC industry, I think I took a strong position from early on. And my position was to say, I will bet on the founders first because this is my asset, this is my value, this is what really matters. And I will go after my investor after, I will go for closing after. So contrary to many emerging fund manager, I didn't go straight and try to raise a fund straight away. I was more concerned about building my pipeline and being able actually to show that I have ability to detect some of the most amazing founders out there, that I have the trust and that they believe that I have a special view and network and access that can be valuable to them outside of money to show that I can get access to these deals. And so this is basically what I've done. So over the last past 2 years, what I've done is build an accelerator program as a form as a launch pad where we've worked with a set of founders originally, six of them, and now we extended to more than 40 of them to basically kind of support them in their fundraising. And last year, for the first time, we made one first strong investment. That strong investment actually is a very interesting one because I think, in a way, it's a perfect first investment I could have done. Because I'm coming from software and AI, I've been in AI for more than 10 years. I have found somehow the best way to illustrate my career, but also my switch to bio because I decided to invest into DNA storage. Now, why is DNA storage extremely interesting from an investment perspective? It's simply because we're talking here about the future of computing and more specifically the future of AI infrastructure. And so for someone like me who worked on AI infrastructure and deployed the first generation of AI infrastructure at Scaleway, a massive cloud service provider in Europe, I think it was a perfect way to kind of make the connection in between where I was coming from and where I'm going. More than 5 years ago, when I was interviewed, I was talking about the fact that from an infrastructure perspective, the challenge of AI was not really so much on the use case, but more on the industrialization. And I commented on the fact that energy and power was going to be one of the most difficult constraints to address. And the reason why I was able actually to make that assessment is because, of course, I was deploying NVIDIA GPUs at that time and I knew and I was dealing with these energy issues. But I guess the really anchor for me was the fact that I'm a physicist by training. I studied fundamental physics, and so physics is always the lens through which I'm actually looking at the world. And so energy for a physicist is something that is um, something that we all learn that you cannot generate it out of nowhere, and energy is something that transfer, but you don't create it out of nothing. And so these physics law are not something that you can break, and unless you actually abide by them, it's very difficult actually to build. And so DNA storage address some of the next stage issues when everyone will be done with energy and everyone will be over addressing the energy issue. My prediction is to say that very clearly on and very quickly on, people are going to start to realize that we don't have the right form factor to be able actually to store the huge amount of data that AI-enabled use cases is going to generate for us. Our industry and the digitalization of our world has already put a lot of pressure on data centers and service providers to actually store the huge amount of data that is basically generated every day. And AI is just going to multiply that, but a factor 1,000, if not more. So addressing the way that we're dealing with storing information is actually very critical, specifically more so if we're thinking about putting data centers in space, because space is a very high constrained environment. So we will definitely not be able actually to afford the luxury of having racks of storage devices along long corridors. And so DNA was actually the perfect, obvious technology that I needed to go to and for, because DNA has the ability actually to store a huge amount of information on a form factor, which is actually ridiculously small. I'm talking about being able to store the equivalent of the National Archive for a country on something that is as big as a pill. So it's a perfect technology from a form factor perspective in its ability to store a huge amount of information, but it's also very important because DNA is actually very resistant to temperature changes, which is not the case for classic HDD drive storage. It's also very long conservation. That means that we are able right now to basically think about maybe bringing back the mammoth. And the reason why we can do that is because we have the DNA of the mammoth from million years ago. And so that information has not been degraded over millions of years. And so DNA offer really like that long-term storage and capability that is unmatched forever. And I think that in a way is a perfect metaphor of what all of us in TechBio are standing for. What we're saying is basically to say, for a long, long time, human has tried to mimic and replicate nature. And because we didn't have a strong understanding or mastering of biology, we couldn't actually replicate this mechanism of biology and be able to master it. And so we invented intermediary technologies such as a silicon-based approach to technology and everything that we built before that. But now is the time where we have reached that inflection point where we have become so strong technologically that from either computing perspective and our ability to search through wide spaces and strong search spaces, or whether in terms of computing capabilities in crashing a huge amount of data, or even on the knowledge that we have and control that we have on biology through technologies such as bioengineering and gene editing and everything that has been developed over the last past 15 years. We are really at that inflection point where we can really become masters of our future and really program life as we know it. And so that means that we can now basically kind of mimic some of the best mechanism on Earth. And really, I think biology is the most sophisticated form of engineering, and so we're just going back to that actually.
Right. That's quite interesting and extremely impressive on how you think about things and problems. It's rare to find a VC or investor who can think so far ahead and with first principles, right? And that's because you have this knowledge of physics and biology and all these science subjects that not a lot of people have because it requires time, and you're also in technology, right? You spend time there, so that gives you that unique position to look at the world through a very different lens and a different level of clarity than others can, because they're limited by sort of knowledge that they have, which is accessible to most. The knowledge you have is a lot of it is also academic, right? So very impressive and very respect worthy on how you think about things, right? And it's rare to find, because VCs also, I see that a lot of these times they're investing in a sector and they know what are the common trends in one sector, and they're going to go and find companies in that trend or what's happening in one space. But to think from first fundamentals, what's going to be big in the next 50, 10, or maybe 100 years, right? And backing that technology now, uh, that's quite impressive. So kudos to you for doing that. So, as a woman and a mother in tech and venture capital, what changes do you hope to see in the industry to better support diverse founders and leaders?
Yeah, I think representation matters. I think for me, one of the challenge, even on a day-to-day basis, is really be able to find myself a spot to be able to exist, to go after what I believed in, and it's not an easy task. And I think that what helps is really being able to reconnect the dots and human connection. That one push that you get, that one advice, that one nice word that will keep you going when things are going wrong and you feel like it's almost impossible. I think representation matters. So we need more women, definitely. I think you cannot build and think about building a wall, whether it is from an algorithm perspective or whether it is at every other level. when we are leaving one side of the equation out. And so we need more women in tech and in STEM in general. I think it starts very early on, and it's really about how we actually break the mental images to actually show to the little girls that tech is amazing. It's not just for boys, that they can do it also, and they need the support. I think it's also later on in life because you, as a woman in tech, you need to really push to have your space, and so it requires some adjustment at every level after the studies when you're entering your career to make sure that women are not dropping out. Unfortunately, we have the numbers. It's a huge amount of women that along the way, along the careers, will just drop out of tech easy way. It's also a societal change because for that to occur, we need to address the fact that men and women from a biological perspective are different. Women are the one carrying the children, and therefore it's a strain on our ability to be fully present physically and mimic some of what we are asked to. So we need that adjustment that allow for women to who become mothers to actually be able to still push for their careers. I would say that, for example, one thing that I think was absolutely not normal for me was as a single mother, it was first and foremost extremely difficult because you have to deal with the fact that even if you were a mother with a partner, it would be complicated. But if you are alone, it's even also complicated. So at some point, as an executive, to be able to take my meetings from 7, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and maybe later on, I had basically three babysitters to be able to support me and help me into making sure that my son would be taken care of and I would be still able to make and commit without having to justify myself and say, oh, I can't make it because I have a child at home. And I think that's not normal. I don't have fond memories of that period of time because in a way the money that I was making was actually used to afford that, but I think that that shouldn't be the standard. Because what about all of the others? What about the working mothers that are not making executive salaries and therefore cannot afford that luxury? So I think there's still a long way to go for our society as a whole to really address some of these key issues. But I tend to not be pessimistic about it. I can see that a lot of people are pushing forwards, a lot of changes are happening. Our society are changing also. Boys are being raised by mothers. They can see example of very successful mothers and women. And so the mentality are changing also. So I want to see the world in a very optimistic way. And so I want to see the good side of things. But that doesn't mean that we still need to wait for it. There is active position that we need to take to make these changes happen. And so it's very important that we stick to it and we really fight for them because otherwise 100 years from now we'll still be at the same condition. The numbers are very straightforward. If we keep maintaining the same pace for change, it will take us hundred of years to actually reach parity between women and women. And that's not acceptable. So although I am optimistic, I'm also a scientist and numbers doesn't lie. And so in that sense, I do wish to see more changes and rapidly changing changes for sure.
Absolutely. Certainly a long, long way to go for us in trying to bring that parity in the workforce and try to be more accommodative and more empathetic for women. And like you said, women are different. I think the responsibilities they take care of are also different, and you cannot just have the same rules across the board. That just won't work. And women like you show massive resilience to just to keep their careers alive, just to keep going, and just to survive, right? Sometimes it's a necessity even, right? And workplaces need to start understanding that and be more accommodative with that. And I think that's very crucial. So yes, totally. My last question before we try to wrap this up, right? Looking ahead, what breakthroughs in synthetic biology or tech bio do you think will have the most profound impact on society in the next decade? Or maybe if a decade is not enough, let's say maybe 30, 40 years.
I think I'm going to be selfish on this one. I think for me, the most important one is actually neuroscience and everything related to the brain and the research on the brain. Not to say that any other topics such as survival through food chain and building better food sources or innovation around agriculture and food tech is not important. It is extremely important, but at the essence, I care about what it is to be human. And I think that in order for that to occur, it's really kind of bouncing back on addressing a lot of the very fundamental topic. And for me, it's the notion of violence. I do believe, I want to believe that we can cure violence. I want to believe that it's deeply rooted into brain computer technologies and this address not only violence, but it's also address some of the anxiety that you can see now around AI and the fact that AI might be, you know, kind of a threat to our human species. I think I see things differently. I think more a convergence and where AI can be a very powerful tool to educate us, bring back some of us to empathy because our society has lost a lot in terms of empathy and what it is to be a human. And so maybe this will be the next jump for us. So I see it more as an evolution rather than a threat to the species. But definitely for me, as someone that has started this entire journey looking for something that would address trauma and violence, I'm betting on everything related to neuroscience and that span from being able to address trauma, to being able to read and write on the brain, to make us enhance, to communicate better with yourself, but also with technology. It's opened the doors to so many use cases that are fundamental. But I guess the thread for me is really about taking us back to what it is to be human and really trying to threaten what it is to be human.
Absolutely. Now to the rapid fire round, wherein I'll ask you six quick questions about the investing you're doing or the accelerator that you run, and you can give six quick answers, right? So the first one is, what are the sectors and regions you invest in?
So everything related to AI in bio. So we started with AI applied to future of computing with DNA storage. Obviously, that means that we can do this for biomolecular computing, and so we're thinking about application of biomolecular computing as a way for addressing the silicon constraint. Extending it to drugs and therapeutics and biomanufacturing. Again, biomanufacturing is very important. It can be used for food and also pharmaceutical, all the way to cosmetic products.
That's great. What's the typical stage at which you invest?
Pre-seed seed stage, and the goal is for us to bring our startups to a Series A and make them actually a successful growing past a Series A, with connecting them with a massive network of amazing investors that can take them on the next journey afterward.
Great. Do you lead rounds?
No, never. Not right now. The fund has not been mobilized actually too late. So we believe that other investor from our network with whom we partners are the best one. For now, we're focusing on trying to be the best, supporting them into really growing from that pre-seed seed stage to Series A. So we are basically securing for our investors their investment and making sure that we're able actually to have that the highest number of startup crossing that chasm between pre-seed, seed, and Series A.
That's great. Typical check size, maybe from the investments that you made, or what do you
Yeah,
plan to have
so
on? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so the fund will modelize basically to have a small check size of 100K at the minimum, all the way to 500K and more as a first time fund, and will follow on later on in additional round all the way to Series A.
Got it. Where can founders get in touch in case there's a direct way?
Yeah, the best way is if you're a founder and you're interested into our support, reach out to me directly by going to our website. So thenextsequence.com. This is the website for our launchpad, and you will have information of our program, how we work with US founders, and how we can really support you. We are long-term players, so we take companies from the very early days in pre-seed all the way to bringing them to Series A. So, typically with our last investment, this is a founder that we've known and worked with for more than 2 years and a half before making that commitment. So, yeah.
Right. That's awesome. Last one, where can our listeners follow you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. This is where I'm the most active. I'm very bad at Twitter, although I'm amazingly good at stalking people and getting a lot of my information on Twitter. I'm actually more active on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and follow me.
Awesome. I'll make sure to put those links in the show notes below so our listeners can get there easily. Thanks so much for making time for this, Loretta. It's been a very insightful conversation. I learned a lot of things about biotechnology and where we are headed in that space, and also massive respect to how you think about things and your resilience as well, for coming to where you have come. And I know there's a long way to go still. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Prashant. Really appreciate it and amazing podcast. I really am looking forward to release and thank you again.
Likewise. Thank you.